Have you ever found yourself asking, why do I keep choosing people who don't treat me right? Or seen someone you care about stay in a relationship that's clearly painful? The answer is rarely simple. But psychology gives us a mirror, a way to see the patterns hiding in plain sight. If you're someone who wants to understand the hidden forces that shape our love lives, not just the visible heartbreaks, but the deep emotional roots behind them, then stay with me. What you're about to hear may not just open your mind, it might just heal your heart. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about why people stay in harmful relationships, one of the most overlooked answers is how they see themselves, their self-worth. In psychology, self-worth is not just about confidence or how we act in public. It's about the silent narrative we carry inside. Am I enough? Do I deserve real love? For many people, the painful truth is they don't think they do, and so they settle. When someone has low self-worth, their expectations in relationships drop drastically. It's not always obvious. They don't walk around saying, I deserve pain. Instead, they tolerate things others wouldn't. Emotional neglect, manipulation, even cruelty, because a part of them believes that's all they're worth. They confuse survival with love, and they convince themselves that as long as someone stays, even if that person is hurting them, it's better than being alone. This doesn't happen overnight. Often, it begins in early life. Children who grow up without consistent emotional validation, or worse, with criticism or conditional affection, start to believe love must be earned, not given. They learn that their needs are too much, that love is something unstable, and that being chosen sometimes means being quiet, being smaller, being less of themselves. Those lessons follow them into adulthood, silently shaping every relationship they enter. And so, when someone shows them a fraction of attention, even if it's inconsistent or controlling, it feels like enough. They accept it, because deep down they believe asking for more would be selfish, unrealistic, or too much. They don't realize they're compromising their emotional safety just to avoid abandonment. In reality, they're not in love with a person. They're attached to the validation, to the brief moment of kindness that feel like rare approval. One powerful concept in psychology explains this even further: confirmation bias. When someone believes they are unworthy, they tend to notice and remember experiences that confirm that belief. So, when their partner ignores them, insults them, or doesn't show up, instead of seeing it as a red flag, they absorb it as a truth about themselves. Maybe I was too needy. Maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe it's my fault. This creates a cycle where their low self-worth pulls them toward harmful partners, and those partners reinforce their low self-worth. The tragic irony is that people with low self-worth often give the most. They overextend, overforgive, overexplain. They believe if they just love harder, maybe the person will change. But healthy love doesn't require performance. It requires presence, consistency, and mutual respect. The more someone sacrifices their boundaries just to keep someone close, the more they lose touch with their own value. Another psychological trap here is fear of rejection. Many people with low self-worth would rather stay in a painful relationship than risk being alone. Not because they enjoy the pain, but because loneliness feels like proof that they were unlovable all along. This fear drives them to accept behavior that slowly chips away at their dignity, because they believe that's better than facing the silence of their own company. The real healing begins when someone recognizes this pattern, not with judgment, but with compassion. Because low self-worth isn't a character flaw, it's a wound. And like any wound, it needs attention, not shame. The more we understand this, the more we can stop blaming ourselves for the love we accepted and start believing we deserve something better. So, if you've ever asked, why do I fall for those who hurt me? The answer might not be in who they are, but in how you see yourself. The work isn't just to find someone better. The work is to believe that you're already enough, just as you are, and that love, real love, will never ask you to suffer to feel seen. One of the most paradoxical truths in psychology is that human beings don't always seek what is good for them. They seek what feels familiar. This is especially true in the case of relationships. When someone continues to choose partners who hurt them, it's not always because they enjoy suffering or are blind to pain. More often than not, it's because the emotional discomfort they experience feels known, predictable, and strangely safe, while genuine love, peace, and stability feel unfamiliar, even threatening. Our nervous systems are wired by experience. From a young age, the emotional environment we grow up in teaches our body and brain what normal feels like. If someone grows up in a household where love was mixed with inconsistency, where affection came with anxiety, where praise came with criticism, then that chaos becomes emotionally familiar. The child may not have understood it, but their nervous system learned that love feels intense, unstable, and even painful. So later in life, when they meet someone calm, kind, and emotionally available, it might not feel right. It might feel boring, or worse, unsafe. This is where the concept of familiar pain becomes relevant. When someone enters a relationship that mirrors the emotional tone of their early life, even if that tone was marked by emotional neglect or emotional chaos, their brain subconsciously goes, I recognize this. I know how to survive this. It doesn't feel good, but it feels known. And the human brain often prefers the known over the unknown, even if the known is harmful. Peace, on the other hand, emotional stability, predictability, healthy communication, can feel unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable for someone who has never experienced it consistently. A peaceful relationship doesn't create the same spikes in adrenaline or dopamine. There's no emotional roller coaster, no constant guessing games, no high highs followed by low lows. For someone used to emotional chaos, this calm feels empty. They might even interpret it as a lack of love, thinking, why doesn't this feel exciting? Not realizing that the excitement they crave is actually emotional instability. This emotional pattern is reinforced over time. People unknowingly recreate the emotional atmosphere of their past in their adult relationships. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the drive to reenact unresolved emotional wounds in an attempt to master them. For example, someone who had a distant or critical parent may find themselves drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, subconsciously hoping that this time they can earn the love they never got. But instead of healing, the wound deepens. Familiar pain also gives a false sense of control. If someone knows how a toxic pattern works, if they've lived it before, they at least know the rules. They know when to retreat, when to apologize, when to expect rejection. With peace and healthy love, there are no crisis points to manage, no need to protect oneself constantly, no drama to decode. And for many people, that absence of chaos feels like vulnerability. It feels like losing control. So they go back to what they know, even if what they know hurts. What's important to understand is that this cycle doesn't mean someone is broken. It means their emotional blueprint was written under conditions of stress, inconsistency, or fear. And those patterns can be rewritten. But it takes awareness, compassion, and often professional support. The first step is recognizing that just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's safe. Just because someone feels drawn to a certain type of partner doesn't mean that partner is good for them. The pull of familiar pain is powerful, but it is not unbreakable. Relearning peace is not easy. It may require sitting with discomfort in moments of stillness, accepting kindness without suspicion, and staying present when someone treats you with gentle consistency. It might mean confronting the part of yourself that equated love with chaos, and learning that love without pain is not less meaningful. It's just less dramatic, and that's a good thing. Eventually, with time and healing, the nervous system can learn a new normal, one that isn't built on survival and emotional tension, but on mutual care, safety, and emotional honesty. In that new space, peace no longer feels foreign. It feels deserved. In modern relationships, one of the most misunderstood emotions is intensity. We often confuse intense feelings with love. The butterflies, the obsession, the highs and lows, the emotional drama, they feel powerful. They feel consuming. And so, we assume they must be love. But psychological research and emotional experience both show us intensity is not love. Intensity is chemistry, uncertainty, adrenaline, sometimes even trauma, but not love in its healthiest form. Many people grow up believing that real love should feel like a storm. Popular movies and media romanticize this idea. The fight, the tears, the makeup kiss, the chase. It becomes normalized. So, when people find themselves in relationships that feel calm, stable, and respectful, they might feel something is missing. That something is often the emotional roller coaster they associate with love. But love, when it's healthy, doesn't feel like drowning. It feels like breathing. Psychologically speaking, intensity often activates the same parts of our brain that respond to danger. This includes the amygdala, our emotional alarm system, and our body's stress response, including the release of cortisol and adrenaline. In chaotic relationships, this becomes a pattern. Highs feel ecstatic, but lows feel devastating. The brain becomes addicted to the chemical spikes, creating a cycle where emotional instability starts to feel like passion. But in reality, it's dysregulation. This confusion between intensity and love is especially common in people who have unresolved attachment wounds. For example, someone with an anxious attachment style may crave closeness and feel heightened emotions in relationships where their partner is inconsistent. The inconsistency, not knowing whether they'll be loved or rejected, triggers intense feelings. They're always on edge, emotionally activated, which they interpret as strong love. But it's not love, it's anxiety. On the flip side, someone with an avoidant attachment style might find intense emotions threatening. They may enter into push-pull dynamics where they provoke intensity but fear intimacy. The result? A relationship that's constantly swinging between closeness and distance, a dynamic that feels powerful, but is actually emotionally unsafe for both people. Real love is not about emotional chaos. It's not about waking up one day adored and the next day abandoned. It's not about dramatic gestures followed by silence. Love is built on consistency, on safety, on mutual respect and trust. But for someone used to emotional extremes, that kind of love can feel underwhelming. The absence of anxiety feels like boredom. The lack of volatility feels like the absence of spark. Another reason why we confuse intensity with love is that intense relationships often involve fantasy rather than reality. We project idealized images onto the other person. We fall in love with potential, not the person. The emotional drama keeps us focused on what could be rather than what actually is. This projection fuels emotional highs, but ultimately leads to disappointment and pain when reality doesn't meet the fantasy. In many toxic or emotionally abusive relationships, intensity is weaponized. The abuser may alternate between affection and cruelty, creating a psychological condition called trauma bonding. The unpredictability of their behavior keeps the victim emotionally hooked. After every episode of mistreatment, a moment of tenderness feels more powerful than it should. The brain releases dopamine in response to that relief, creating a false sense of connection. Again, the cycle continues, not because of love, but because of emotional conditioning. The truth is, healthy love doesn't come with constant uncertainty. You don't have to decode texts read between the lines, or live in fear being too much or not enough. Love doesn't require you to perform. It allows you to rest. Intensity can feel exciting, even intoxicating. But excitement doesn't always equal emotional safety. A partner who respects your boundaries, communicates honestly, and stands by you in both quiet and loud moments, that's the one building something real. Real love may not always be glamorous, but it is nourishing. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It doesn't make you feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells. Understanding this difference is crucial for healing. It requires unlearning the idea that love has to hurt to be real. It asks you to slow down, to pay attention not just to how someone makes you feel in moments of passion, but how they make you feel in moments of silence, of conflict, of vulnerability. Does the person make you feel seen, safe, free to be yourself without fear? That's love, not just adrenaline and desire, but presence and protection. When we stop chasing intensity, we create space for something deeper, emotional intimacy. Intimacy isn't built in moments of passion, but in shared routines, honest conversations, mutual respect, and emotional availability. It's not rushed. It's not based on drama. It grows slowly like trust, and once it's there, it changes everything. In the end, choosing love over intensity means choosing emotional maturity over temporary thrills. It means learning that love is not found in how loud the heartbeat gets during conflict, but how calmly two people come together after. That's the real heart of love, not chaos, but connection. One of the most fascinating yet painful phenomena in human relationships is how we often find ourselves drawn to the same kind of people, even when they hurt us. This isn't random. Psychology calls this process repetition compulsion. It's an unconscious drive to repeat past emotional experiences, especially those formed during early childhood. But there's a twist. We don't repeat them just for the sake of it. We repeat them because deep down, we're trying to change the ending. Repetition compulsion is not a conscious decision. No one wakes up thinking, let me fall in love with someone who will make me feel abandoned like my father did, or let me chase the affection of someone emotionally distant like my mother was. And yet, people often find themselves in those exact scenarios over and over again. The people may change, the faces may be different, but the emotional storyline remains painfully familiar. This happens because the human brain is wired for familiarity. Even when that familiarity is painful, it feels safer than the unknown. So, if someone grew up in a home where love was conditional, they may subconsciously seek partners who also make love feel like something they have to earn. If someone grew up feeling unseen or unimportant, they may be drawn to partners who ignore or dismiss them, not because they want to be hurt, but because their inner child is still trying to prove they are lovable, hoping that this time, the story will end differently. Unfortunately, it rarely does, not without awareness and healing. What starts as an unconscious effort to get it right this time often ends in disappointment, because the patterns being played out are rooted in unresolved trauma. The partner we're trying to fix is not the parent who hurt us, but the child inside us doesn't know that. That child is still waiting to be heard, nurtured, and chosen. And so, we keep choosing people who reflect our wounds, not our worth. Repetition compulsion shows up in many forms. Sometimes it looks like staying with emotionally unavailable people. Sometimes it looks like tolerating mistreatment because chaos feels like home. Sometimes it means rejecting people who are kind and consistent because kindness feels unfamiliar, even boring, compared to the emotional highs and lows we've learned to associate with real love. There's also a sense of psychological hope that drives this compulsion. If we can finally make this person love us the way we weren't loved before, we can heal the original wound. But healing doesn't work that way. Trying to fix the past through new people rarely works because we're not addressing the core pain. We're just repeating the cycle. And in doing so, we deepen the wound instead of closing it. Therapists often say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's exactly what repetition compulsion does. It creates emotional patterns that feel like destiny, when in reality, they're unresolved pain playing out through our choices. So how do we break free? The first step is awareness. Noticing the patterns. Asking yourself why you're drawn to people who make you feel small, who trigger your anxiety, who mirror your childhood fears. Then comes the deeper work. Reconnecting with your inner child, the part of you that first learned what love feels like. That child needs comfort, not more tests. They don't need to prove their worth. They need to be reminded of it. Healing from repetition compulsion often involves learning new emotional habits. Learning that love doesn't have to be earned. That safety is not the absence of passion. That respect is the baseline, not the reward. It also means embracing people who treat us with care and consistency, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. One of the hardest truths is that healing feels foreign when you're used to pain. Peace feels unnatural when your nervous system is wired for survival. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means new. And new is necessary if we want to create different endings. Repetition compulsion is not a life sentence. It's a signal, a message from the unconscious asking us to finally address what was broken, instead of trying to relive it over and over again. When we become conscious of this dynamic, we take back our power. We stop chasing ghosts. We stop seeking validation from the same sources that once denied us. And instead, we start choosing from a place of wholeness, not from a place of hunger. Ultimately, freedom comes when we stop trying to rewrite the past through others and start writing a new story for ourselves, one where love doesn't hurt and where peace is not the exception but the norm. At the heart of many unhealthy attachments lies a silent, painful emotion, low self-worth. It's not always loud or obvious, Sometimes it hides behind a smile, success, or even confidence. But internally it whispers, I am not enough, I don't deserve better, or love has to be earned. When someone carries this deep-rooted belief about themselves, they often fall for people who reinforce it, not because they want to be hurt, but because on a psychological level, the treatment they receive aligns with how they already feel inside. When we don't believe we are valuable, we seek out external validation to feel whole. We crave approval, attention, and affection, hoping that if someone else can love us, maybe we'll finally feel worthy of that love ourselves. But this puts us in a vulnerable position, one where our sense of identity becomes dependent on how someone else treats us. And unfortunately, people with low self-worth are often drawn to those who confirm their insecurities rather than challenge them. There's a pattern that emerges. The more someone devalues us, the more we try to earn their affection. We try harder, give more, overextend, and sacrifice just to prove that we are lovable. But in that process, we abandon ourselves. We ignore red flags. We tolerate emotional neglect. We mistake being needed for being loved. And we confuse intensity for intimacy. The tragedy is that many people don't even realize they are operating from a place of low self-worth. They just think they're bad at love or always attract the wrong people. But behind the repeated heartbreak is often a belief system that was shaped early in life. Maybe they grew up in homes where love was conditional. Maybe they had caregivers who only showed affection when they achieved something or remained silent when they were hurting. These experiences teach children to link love with performance, to believe that love is something that must be chased, earned, or won. So as adults, they repeat the cycle. They chase emotionally distant partners, hoping that if they can just be good enough, they'll finally receive the affection they were starved for. But every rejection reinforces their inner belief. I'm not good enough. It becomes a loop, a painful one, where each failed relationship deepens the insecurity that started it all. One of the most damaging effects of low self-worth is that it makes people settle. They stay in relationships where they are mistreated because they believe it's the best they can get. Or worse, they start to see disrespect as normal. When you don't believe you deserve kindness, you stop expecting it. And when kindness finally shows up, it feels suspicious or unearned. This is why personal healing is so important before entering or staying in any relationship. When you don't feel whole on your own, love turns into survival. And when love becomes survival, you lose your power. You give away to someone else in hopes they'll fix what's broken inside you. But no partner, no matter how loving, can fix a fractured self-image. That work is internal. That healing must come from within. Building self-worth requires more than just positive affirmations. It demands a deep, honest look at where those beliefs originated. Was it a parent who never said, "I'm proud of you"? A childhood filled with comparison or criticism? A toxic relationship that made you question your value? Once you understand the source, you can begin to unlearn it. You start by setting boundaries, not just with others, but with your own thoughts. You stop letting your inner critic speak louder than your inner truth. You begin to say no to what hurts, even if it feels familiar. You surround yourself with people who reflect your worth, not your wounds. And most importantly, you treat yourself with the same compassion and patience you've always tried to give others. Self-worth is not arrogance. It's not believing you are better than anyone else. It's simply the quiet confidence that you are enough as you are, without needing to prove it to anyone. And from that place, relationships become healthier. You no longer chase love that hurts. You no longer shrink to fit into someone else's idea of enough. You stand tall, not because someone loves you, but because you've learned to love yourself first. The truth is, we teach others how to treat us by the way we treat ourselves. When we believe we are worthy, we naturally repel those who don't. We become less available to people who take us for granted. We stop clinging to those who breadcrumb affection. And we start to recognize that real love doesn't feel like begging. It feels like peace. In the end, the journey to healthy love begins with the relationship we have with ourselves. When we stop looking for validation and start offering it to ourselves, we attract people who mirror that wholeness, not the emptiness we use to hide behind. In the end, the question, why do we fall for people who hurt us, isn't just about love or attraction. It's about the deeper psychological wiring that shapes our choices. From childhood patterns and attachment styles to chemical addictions and the way we define self-worth. Every layer reveals something about how the human mind seeks connection, even in the most painful places. We don't fall for hurtful people because we want to suffer. We fall for them because something in our past, something in our brain chemistry, or something in how we see ourselves convinces us that this is normal or even necessary. The pain, though heavy, often feels familiar. But familiar doesn't mean healthy. What psychology teaches us is this: awareness is power. When we begin to understand why we are drawn to certain people, we can start to question those instincts. We can interrupt the cycle. We can pause before repeating old patterns. And we can begin to choose love that feels safe, secure, and respectful, instead of love that keeps us chasing, bleeding, or breaking. Healing is not easy. It asks us to unlearn what we thought love was. It asks us to rewire our emotional responses and sit with truths we buried for years. But healing is possible and necessary, because the love we settle for will always be a reflection of the love we believe we deserve. So, if you've ever found yourself returning to someone who hurt you, or wondering why you keep repeating the same relationship story, don't blame yourself. Understand yourself. Dig deeper. And remind yourself every single day that you are not hard to love. You are just learning to love yourself in a world that didn't always teach you how. Let this speech not just be knowledge, but a turning point, a place to pause, a place to reflect, and maybe, just maybe, a place to begin again. This time with love that doesn't hurt.